Bill Gaither, known for his influence in the world of contemporary Christian music, Gaither's career spans decades, and he's built a legacy that resonates deeply within both religious and secular circles. From the creation of the Gaither Vocal Band to his countless songwriting accolades, Bill has been a force in shaping the modern gospel sound. His music, filled with uplifting messages of hope, faith, and love, has been a staple in churches across the country and around the world. His reputation for professionalism, devotion to his craft, and unwavering faith made him a beloved figure among fans, colleagues, and artists alike. But as adored as Gaither is by his fans, not everyone in the industry shared that affection. For one prominent celebrity, that admiration for Gaither never existed. The woman in question, a talented artist in her own right, whose career had also been steeped in the world of faith-based music. She had once been seen as a promising newcomer with a voice that could stir the soul and lyrics that resonated deeply with her listeners. Unlike Gaither, who had long been seen as a symbol of stability and respectability within the gospel world, this artist had a more rebellious streak. She was fiercely independent, unafraid to challenge norms, and, above all, unapologetically herself. Her rise to fame was meteoric. Her debut album went platinum, her tours sold out, and her collaborations with other legendary musicians solidified her place within the elite circle of contemporary Christian music. But beneath the glamorous exterior, things were not as perfect as they appeared. As her fame grew, so did whispers about her relationship with some of the more established figures in the industry, particularly Bill Gaither. It was strange at first, subtle comments made in interviews, or the way her eyes would roll whenever his name came up. Fans couldn't quite put their finger on it, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. Unlike the others in the gospel community, who praised Gaither's contributions and would often collaborate with him, this artist seemed to avoid him at every turn. Where some saw Bill Gaither as a mentor or a model of success, she couldn't hide her discomfort in his presence. But why? It didn't make sense, especially given that both artists shared similar roots in faith and music. The industry seemed to offer no answers, leaving the mystery to simmer beneath the surface. For years, it was nothing more than a side note, a story for the tabloids, a headline with no meat. No one had the full picture, and everyone assumed that it was simply a difference in personalities, an artistic clash between two powerful figures with strong opinions. But as the years went on, the tension only grew. Interviews became more pointed, and public events began to feel strained when they shared the same space. Fans, ever curious about their idols, began to speculate. Was there a hidden rivalry? Was it a personal dispute? Was it about artistic differences? Or was it something more, something much darker? As the speculation continued, both artists moved in separate directions within the gospel world. Gaither, with his steady, unwavering presence, continued to inspire generations with his music, while she, still riding the wave of her success, carved her own path, always with a slight distance between her and the other major players in the scene. Yet, despite their distance, the question lingered. What had happened between them? And why did she utterly hate Bill Gaither? At first, the tension between them was subtle, almost imperceptible, a slight shift in the air whenever their names were mentioned in the same breath. It wasn't something the public could easily identify, but those who closely followed the gospel music scene knew that something wasn't quite right. For years, it was like a simmering pot, the heat slowly rising without anyone acknowledging that the water was close to boiling. The first clues came in the form of veiled comments made in interviews. Bill Gaither, ever the gentleman, would speak of his admiration for his peers, praising the younger generation of gospel artists. His words were warm and encouraging, a mentor's pride in seeing the next wave of talent shine. Yet there was always a slight hesitation when it came to talking about her, the one artist whose rise to stardom seemed to parallel his own in some ways. His praise was either lukewarm or non-existent, and those subtle pauses in conversation didn't go unnoticed by the industry insiders who were paying attention. She, on the other hand, was far less reserved. In interviews, she would speak of the old guard of gospel music with a kind of ambivalence, respecting their legacy, but often hinting at a desire to push the genre forward. It was clear that while she appreciated the pioneers who laid the groundwork for the genre, she wasn't one to be tied down by tradition. And Gaither, with his deep roots in the more classic, established style of gospel, seemed to represent everything she wanted to break free from. In a few early interviews, she would smile through gritted teeth when asked about him, her words carefully measured but clearly lacking the warmth others expressed when speaking of Bill. It wasn't overt animosity, no. She was far too calculated for that, but it was the kind of coolness that made her discomfort with him hard to ignore. In one particular segment, when asked directly if she'd ever collaborate with Gaither, she gave a response that made even the host uncomfortable. "I don't think that's something I'd ever pursue." The camera quickly cut away, but fans watching were left with a single, unspoken question. Why? It wasn't just the media that picked up on this. Her colleagues in the industry began to notice the subtle but unmistakable tension. At a music awards show one year, the two were scheduled to present together. Gaither, as always, arrived with a warm smile, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with everyone in sight. But when she entered the room, there was a noticeable shift in the dynamic. She greeted the other artists with enthusiasm, but when it came time to speak with Bill, she avoided eye contact. The interaction was brief, and there was no warmth in her handshake. The coldness in her demeanor was evident to those standing nearby. Fans who had been following the two closely began to whisper among themselves. Was it just a personality clash, or was something more personal at play? After all, Gaither had been in the business long enough to have earned his place in the Gospel Hall of Fame. His credentials were beyond reproach. So, why the frost between them? It seemed more than just a difference in style or approach. As these incidents began to stack up, the media caught wind of the tension and began to speculate. Was there a rivalry brewing in the gospel music world? A clash of egos? Or was something else festering beneath the surface? The rumors swirled, but no one had concrete answers until one fateful incident that would put everything into perspective. For years, the tension between Bill Gaither and her simmered beneath the surface, unspoken but palpable. But all of that changed one fateful night at a prestigious gospel music event, the kind where legends are made and reputations are solidified. It was at this very gathering, in front of a room full of their peers, that the true depth of their animosity came to light, and the media was finally forced to confront the reality of their fractured relationship. The event was a tribute concert honoring the pioneers of gospel music, where Bill Gaither was slated to perform with a slew of other iconic artists. Her name had also been on the list, and everyone assumed that this would be just another typical evening in the world of gospel music, a night of unity, collaboration, and mutual respect. However, what transpired that night would forever change the way fans saw their relationship. As the evening unfolded, something unexpected happened. Bill Gaither was called on stage to lead a group of musicians in one of his signature songs, a performance that had the entire room on its feet. His voice, as always, was smooth, rich with emotion, and his presence commanded respect. As the applause settled, the spotlight turned to her, who was set to perform her own set. But the moment she took the stage, the contrast between the two became glaringly obvious. The tension was undeniable. She performed beautifully, no doubt, but there was an edge to her performance that night, a sense of defiance. Her lyrics, which usually carried a hopeful and inspiring message, felt charged with a certain anger that hadn't been present before. In the middle of her performance, there was an unexpected moment that set the entire room abuzz. As she sang, she glanced towards Gaither, who was seated in the front row. For a fleeting second, the camera caught her expression, a cold, almost sneering look. The audience gasped, and the whispers began. But it wasn't just the glare, it was what happened next that really raised eyebrows. During her final song, a piece that had become a signature hit for her, she took a pointed jab at the old ways of gospel music. With a sly smile, she subtly referenced a line about not being stuck in the past, a not-so-veiled shot at those who, like Gaither, had built their careers on a more traditional gospel sound. The line wasn't in the original song, but the message was clear. It was a calculated move, and the entire room felt it. Bill, visibly uncomfortable, stood up and politely applauded at the end of her performance. But his expression was stiff, his smile strained. The cameras captured the awkwardness, and it was in that moment that fans and industry insiders alike began to connect the dots. This wasn't just a simple personality clash or artistic disagreement. There was something much deeper at play. After the event, the tabloids ran wild with speculation. Had she just thrown shade at Gaither in front of an entire room of gospel icons? And if so, why? The questions flooded in. What had happened between them to make her take such a public shot at the man who had once been regarded as a gospel legend? Behind closed doors, it was said that the tension continued to escalate. The story that began as a quiet undercurrent had now become a full-blown scandal, with fans and industry veterans alike asking for answers. And it was only a matter of time before those answers would surface, revealing the true cause of their feud and why it had become so personal. After years of speculation, vague comments, and public awkwardness, the truth behind the feud between Bill Gaither and her finally came to light, and it was nothing short of explosive. It all began years earlier, during a period when both artists were navigating some of the most pivotal moments in their careers. She had been on the rise, her album gaining traction, and her star steadily climbing in the gospel music world. The industry was taking notice, and it seemed as if nothing could stop her. That was until one fateful collaboration with Bill Gaither's label, a partnership that she initially thought would be a dream come true. Bill, with his decades of experience and established relationships within the industry, had extended an olive branch to her early in her career, inviting her to work with his label on a project that would help solidify her place in the gospel community. It was an opportunity few artists could pass up. But what seemed like a career-making opportunity quickly turned into a nightmare. Behind the scenes, things started to unravel. The project began with the best of intentions, but what she didn't know was that Gaither, who had a history of tightly controlling the direction of his collaborations, was planning on turning her music into something she didn't recognize. The creative differences were stark. Where she wanted to push boundaries and experiment with new sounds, Gaither insisted on keeping everything within the more traditional gospel framework that had made him famous. He pushed for lyrics that were safer, more conservative, and a sound that would resonate with his established audience. The deeper problem, however, was personal. During the recording sessions, she began to feel undermined at every turn. It wasn't just that her artistic vision was being squashed, it was how she was treated in the process. Gaither's position as a mentor and industry giant meant that his voice was often the final one, leaving her feeling belittled and dismissed. It was during one heated argument in the studio, over a particularly crucial song that she had written herself, that the true cracks began to show. She wanted the song to carry a raw, honest message, but Gaither felt it was too edgy, too real for his audience. He told her outright that it wasn't gospel enough, and that the song would never work with his fans. It was this moment that shattered their professional relationship, and ultimately, their personal one. In her eyes, Gaither had taken everything from her. Not just her music, but her very voice as an artist. For someone so dedicated to maintaining artistic integrity, the feeling of being trapped by his control was unbearable. She left the project, and in doing so, walked away from what many saw as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was a decision that cost her dearly, both in terms of the project itself and the professional ties she had to sever as a result. But the emotional toll was much worse. After walking away from the collaboration, she began to hear whispers from others in the industry about Gaither's critiques of her work, none of them flattering. He had called her music unpolished, rebellious, and inappropriate for a mainstream gospel audience. For someone who had worked so hard to break into the industry, these words stung. But it wasn't just about the music, it was personal. The sense of betrayal cut deep. Gaither had once extended a hand, only to pull it back when it was no longer convenient for him. Her anger grew over time, fed by the memories of being silenced and disrespected. She couldn't shake the feeling that Gaither had used her as a pawn, someone to mold into his own image, only to discard her when she refused to conform. In the years that followed, she would openly talk about her disdain for industry figures who tried to control her art, often with thinly veiled references to Gaither's influence in her career. The public started to piece together the story, though the full truth was kept hidden from view until now. It was in that same tribute concert, years later, that the audience finally got the answer they had been waiting for. As she took the stage, delivering a performance laced with subtle barbs, the truth hung in the air like a thick fog. The jabs at tradition, the defiant tone, this wasn't just about artistic differences. This was about betrayal, about the scars left from a time when she had felt like she had no choice but to walk away from the very thing she had worked so hard to build. In a candid interview years later, she would finally open up about the betrayal. "I couldn't be who I wanted to be in that environment," she admitted. "I had to choose between my voice and the machine, and I chose my voice, even if it meant standing alone." The fallout from their feud was immediate and significant. She became more vocal in her criticism of the industry's traditional gatekeepers, carving out a niche for herself as an artist who refused to compromise. While Gaither continued to enjoy his iconic status, the public perception of him shifted slightly, with some fans questioning the true cost of his mentorships. As for her, she found success in her own right, though the scars of that betrayal never fully healed. Today, they remain distant figures in the same world, their paths rarely crossing. While there's no public sign of reconciliation, both continue to thrive, Gaither with his loyal following and her with her fierce independence. The wounds of their past are still fresh, but the music, in its own way, speaks louder than their silence ever could. The story of Bill Gaither and her serves as a reminder of the price of artistic freedom and personal integrity. Their feud, rooted in betrayal and creative differences, still lingers in the gospel world. Though they've moved on, the question remains, could reconciliation ever be possible? Only time will tell, but for now, their music speaks louder than words.